Okay, we're going to go now into a new segment of life. It's about 1949. I'm going to tie in the future with 1949, and of course 1950 starts my Army life and the Korean War. So let's go back to conversation. And this was me in the Army at 22 years old. I was a corporal, and we'll discuss that at great length, but let's phase out now to me. Okay, this is tape number 3. It's still March the 18th. This is about the second hour of today's recordings. The last recording took us to somewhere in 1949. And 1949 was an important year. I was 21 years old. And I was fairly successful doing nothing. What was I doing? I had worked for Eddy Bayer, and he opened up a dress place, and I had the idea, this is going back a year or two, of going to the schools and giving them discounts, and the kids would come for the dresses and they'd get 20% off buying from a manufacturer. He wasn't a manufacturer, but he had already gone out of the blouse business, moved, and he had a little office room, and I worked for Eddy, and I worked for his brother, but Eddy was a good experience. Eddy was a Broadway character, and why I'm bringing this up is simple. In my life, I met a lot of characters. Bud Paxson from the Paxson Network, owner of the Home Shopping Network, Alan Gary, billionaire, Eddy Bayer, moron. Eddy Bayer was a Broadway character. You don't know these names, but he hung out with Xavier Cugat, and Eddy lived on 46th Street in Broadway. He used to hang out at the drugstore on the corner with the theatrical people. He used to run parties in his apartment. He wasn't rich. Eddy had said that he was married. He must have been 50 some odd years old. Said to his wife one night, I'm going out and buying a newspaper. He went to California to buy the Los Angeles Times and never came back. That was Eddy. His brother was different. His brother was married, had a chauffeur, a housekeeper, and so forth. But Eddy was a midtown Manhattan. He used to party with actors like Sonny Tufts, theatrical people, Hollywood. So I met a lot of people through him in the garment center, the wheelers and dealers in the garment center, the inside, the movers, the shakers, hung out with Eddy, and working for Eddy, I was there as a young man. So all the stories I can't go into because there's children and my wife here. So you can't go into all the stories with Eddy. But I was watching the dress shop one day. It was on the 5th floor. It was an office with some dresses on a rack. Not Iraq, but a rack. Same difference. Yeah. A lady comes in and says, Eddy told me to come pick out a dress. I was out with him last night. I met him at a party. He told me to pick out a dress. Moron, me. She picks out a dress and leaves. And Eddy comes back. I said, your girlfriend was here. I gave her the dress. He was ready to kill me. He didn't send anyone for a dress. Anyway, she was staying at the Sherry Netherlands. So he said to me, you go to the Sherry Netherlands and get back my dress. Now the dress may have been all of $29, but
that's a lot of money.
He wanted his dress back. So I parked myself in the lobby of the Sherry Netherlands, looking for this lady. I don't know if I ever found her or what, or I've got back the dress. I really don't remember. But I think that was the end. Oh. Years later, I went back, and Eddy had the dresses all hanging by the window, and they were all faded on one sleeve. No one bought the dresses that I bought. I was a good dress buyer, but I had different taste in the world. So, but anyway, there's a meaning to all of this. So, Eddy and Paramount Fabrics, which was a velvet company. You see, in the garment center in those days, and even today, everything had a section. If you went to ladies' blouses, it was 36th Street between Broadway and 6th Avenue. If you were into children's clothing, it was 8th Avenue. If you were into coats, you were 8th and 38th Street, woolens. If you were into cheap dresses, 7th Avenue. Oh, you're a 7th Avenue manufacturer, cheap stuff. Today it's all Hong Kong, and better dresses was Broadway. The better evening gowns, and so and the hats were 6th Avenue, and the flowers were down on 23rd Street. Everything had a section. And of course, I knew every section because I worked in every section and I knew every section. So anyway, we're getting now back to 1949. And I was 21 years old. And I wanted a career in textiles or in ladies' clothing. I look well in ladies' clothing, I don't know. But you have to laugh at something, leave it alone. And I was working for Michael and David in a little textile place. And I was examining fabrics. There's a huge machine, you put a roll of fabrics and you watch. And if there's a damage in the fabrics, a misweave, you put a sticker at the end. And it keeps rolling and rolling and another sticker. I was a fabric examiner and I was a delivery boy. But I was moving up in the world. I was becoming a salesman. And I would go out and sell fabrics. And I was very good at it. As a matter of fact, I sold some guy on 8th Avenue opposite the bus terminal, and no one could sell him. He was a cheap store. I sold him all my remnants, silks, and they were very happy. And so one day I go to sell fabric to a man in I guess he was a distributor also. Oh, let me say this. How did we get our seconds? Thievery. David or Michael knew a guy at Celanese Corporation. The Celanese Corporation in textiles was like General Motors in cars. Empire State Building, big textiles, Celanese. So what it seems to have been happening is this guy had some plant connection at Celanese when they made and wove the fabrics. He would have fabrics marked seconds and damaged that were perfect. And he would sell them to David and Michael as seconds, and then they were able to take the label off and resell them as firsts. But you see all the dishonesty. So they paid him Celanese laws. That's why I worry about our employees, you know. But anyway, I remember we were going to the Empire State Building. I think David had a convertible, and we were there, and he parked in front of the Empire State Building, and he said, "Stay in the car." I said, "The cops are going." So the cops made me drive around the corner. I didn't even have a license, I don't think. But whatever it was. Now comes the transition to Army. But there's a transition from fabrics, because I had to wear a uniform now. What happened was, one day I go out to see this guy to sell him fabrics in some building on Broadway. He was a fabric company himself. And I sold him this nice order of fabrics. You know, they're big. You know, I'm not talking about, $10. We're talking about bolts and ringing, cloth. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to factor it, meaning he didn't have the money or something, and he wanted me to be paid by a factoring company, and then he pays the factoring company. It's a whole thing in the garment center when they don't have, everything's factored. So I said to him, factor Geronimo 687. I gave him the phone number. He was quite impressed that this kid only didn't sell him at 21. This man was about 55. But he also knew the factor's number in his head. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I got the order and I'm leaving, and I see he puts on his coat. And he comes to the elevator with me. And he says, do you play chess? I said, no. I don't even play baseball. What are you giving me with chess? He says, well, let me explain. This is on the way down with the elevator. I have a daughter who's 19 years old. And I'd like her to meet you. But if you come over to the house to meet me and play chess, you'll meet her without me telling her I brought you home for her. I said, well, I don't play chess. He said, all right, come over to the house. Strangely enough, he lived on Eastern Parkway. But he lived in Turner Towers. Now, what's Turner Towers? Where I delivered the meat to the rich ladies 10 blocks away. He lived in Turner Towers. So you see, the world is round. My 25-cent tip at Turner Towers when I was 14, now I'm 21. I'm going to meet this guy's daughter in Turner Towers. So when I say you meet interesting people. So anyway, I take her out. It wasn't Doris Dobshinsky. It wasn't Sobel Sola. I don't even know her name. Because I had dated maybe 30, 40 people in my time. Because dating was different in those days. You went out, it was 3 days a week you went out. Anyway, now I'm dating his daughter, just once or twice, movie here, this. He's already got the wedding plans made. I mean, if you know the phone number, you get married.
Right.
And she wasn't really marriage material. I get a notice from Uncle Sam, the government. They had restarted the draft. Now we're in 1950. South Korea is attacked. Truman goes to defend South Korea. We have to draft American boys, me, to go to Korea to fight the North Koreans. Okay, I don't mind it. North Korea's cold, and it's mountains, and people are shooting. Why not go? This is a perfect vacation.
Yeah.
But I've got a good brain.
Yeah.
They can't take me in the Army. I can't see. So I really don't care. Not only can't I see, I can't walk because I have a thing called varicose veins. So, that's fine. This guy's going to go. This guy's going to go. Everyone's going to go. But I'm not going because I am not well. So they take you down to Whitehall Street in Brooklyn to be examined. And you get to the end of the line, and some guy stamps it, examination, physical. Oh, before you go for your physical, you take a mental test, an IQ test. And the guy who gives you the IQ test, he's an Army man, but he's a liar. Because he says, don't try to fail it, because what you do on this test has no bearing on being accepted into the Army. It's just our way of, if you do go in the Army, we know where to place you. So I take this test. And I get a 99 percentile. But I don't really care because I can't go to the Army because I'm 4F. Now I get to the physical, and I go through this doctor. It's different doctors, an eye doctor, a leg doctor, an ear doctor. It's room to room, doctor to doctor, line to line, in underwear. Not the doctors, me. And I get to the end of the line. The guy stamps my paper, accepted. I said, wait a minute, woo, wait a minute. No, accepted. Accepted. No doctor turned you down, you're accepted. I go home, and I say, Mom, I have been drafted. So we go to my own doctor, and he writes a note that this man is not, and they look at the note and they say, well, throw it away. This man is very bright. And we can use them in the Army for other than physical means. What am I doing? Invent a bomb? So anyway, the next thing I know is that I'm being interviewed at another location for a job in the Army. I know what it was. I was sworn in, you take an oath, and now they interview you for what they're going to do in the Army. And this is a true story. They interviewed me, and the guy said to me, I've never recommended anyone for this job that didn't have a college education, but I'm recommending you as an interviewer because you learned more about me than I learned about you. And he went to the back and he spoke to some higher officer, and they said, no, he can't be an interviewer. So there I was in the Army, couldn't be an interviewer, and they put me on a bus. Now, before this happened, let me go back, because the man with the textiles, the man with the daughter, the man in Turner Towers, now knows I'm going to the Army. And he comes into my life later on. He's a Swiss man, so don't let me forget Switzerland. So I go to the Army, and they put me on a bus with all these soldiers, 40 others, no uniforms, no nothing. And they're sending me to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. It is November the 7th or 8th in the year 1950. And that was when your mother was not born in 50, that was her birth date.
Yeah.
I get to this camp, and it's an old Army camp with wooden barracks that they resurrected for training troops. But I know I can't stay here because I'm not a troop. Army life was not for me. So I get there, and I can't march. So they sent me to every morning anyone who's sick goes to a place where they say, the second or third day, some guy says, looks at my feet, he says, scratched to go home, or scratched for discharge, or whatever it means. And that means that you go home with no record, you're not discharged, you don't get an honorable, it never existed, you go home. Now, fate is very funny, because I was in the Army, and a Navy officer walks in, and he says, and he says, scratch for discharge. And he looks at it, and he says, oh no. His brain and his level of intelligence will use him for something else. He doesn't have to be physically fit. All of a sudden, I wished I was a moron. In other words, here I am, I want to be a moron, and they're taking me into the Army, and I can't march, and I can't sight a gun, nothing. So I said, I can't walk. He said, we'll operate. I said, no, I'll go home. He said, no, we'll operate. So they put me in the hospital, and they operate on my leg. Now, let me finish. But the first week in the hospital, they can't operate because they have a cold. So you stay in bed in the hospital for a week. Then they say, well, we're not operating now, maybe it was Thanksgiving. So you can go home for the weekend. I was so sure I was going to get out of the Army that well, it was Thanksgiving, was before that, because I'll tell you why. Everyone went home for Thanksgiving, they wouldn't let me go home. First of all, I was being trained by the National Guard, or the reservists. They brought them in from other jobs to train us. And I was with a Polish group. My sergeant was Polish, my super sergeant was Polish, the corporal was Polish. And the Poles, whoever watches this, hated the Jews. In fact, the Polish people killed more Jews than the Germans. So here I was with a bad leg, which they hated. And worse than that, Friday night is when you clean up the barracks. You wash the floor, you clean the toilets. But Friday night is when Jewish guys go to services. And they can't stop you from going services. So they hate you even worse because you're going to shul on Friday night and they're cleaning the barracks. So this is all going very well. I mean, they got me on KP and kitchen duty and scrubbing toilets. They're going to get me. So anyway, I'm in the hospital, and gonna a month for a leg operation, because they can't. Holidays, they don't send you back. You stay in the hospital. They don't care for what they're paying you. You stay in the hospital. Meanwhile, we had a contest in the hospital. They came around with a giant cane to every bed. Cane was a candy cane. Cane was about this big, about that thick, and you have to guess the weight of the cane, and whoever guessed the weight, the closest, would get the cane, the candy cane. So the girl comes to my bed. I remember a redheaded girl, and she said, her name was Dara Stupczynski, not Dara Stupczynski.
Yeah, right.
And she comes to the bed, and I say, okay, pi 2 square r, blah, blah, and I give this formula, and I give a weight. The next day they come back, you won, you were right on the head.
Yeah, right.
Wait, let me finish. There was no formula. They thought this moron had a formula for candy cane weights.
Oh,
So I got this cane. Now I'm in bed with a cane,
right.
and I'm going home. They told me to go home. It wasn't Thanksgiving. It was just a weekend pass. And I have no car. I got to hitchhike with a cane, with this big candy cane.
Oh my God.
So the cane broke on the way home, and that's how we got the cane mutiny from the cane. No, see, that's another movie and another story. It's another picture. Anyway, so I'm in this army base. My mother comes up and my father comes up to visit me when I'm in the hospital. I wanted to see anyone. I don't care. Saddam Hussein could come and visit me. I didn't care, no how. And then Morty drove them up because my father didn't have a car, and so Morty Pollock, who worked for me later on in Liberty, he came to Liberty and worked for me, and your mother went out with his son in Liberty when she was a teenager, and anyway, Morty died and I killed his son. So, no, teasing you. Anyway, so they came to visit. It was very nice to see them, and a month later, they took me through what they call training, basic training, but they had no time because the outfit was shipping out and I was a month in a hospital. So they just took me to the rifle range and boom, and you shoot. And one night I was on guard duty, and whatever it was, I got through it. Now they were deciding, where do you go from there? Because you have two choices. Well, three. You go to Korea, you stay in the States, or you go to Germany, because they were building up Germany in case Russia, remember there was a Cold War, attacked the Germans when we were being threatened over there by the Koreans and the Chinese. They were all together, communists. Mm-hmm. So, now you got to see that the world politics is affecting my life. Here I don't want anything to affect my life, but the army and the world and Korea. A North Korean is making me lay in bed in the hospital with a candy cane. So you see that the world is a strange set of complex pictures. Anyway, so we go out in the field, not the field, between the buildings, and they announce who's going where. The whole company and the whole group, oh, by the way, the company next to us was the Tennessee National Guard. The Tennessee National Guard. And all I heard for 10 weeks was the Tennessee Waltz. There was a song back then, the Tennessee Waltz. And these guys played it on every loudspeaker. And we went to the roller skating rink downtown one night, and all they kept requesting was the Tennessee Waltz. So I had the Poles over here in my group, and the rednecks from Tennessee next to me, and this Jewish boy is saying, I don't want to be in the army, take me home. So anyway, but you see, the whole company goes to Korea, except me. Because, like the sergeant said, we don't want you with us. Baloney. They said he's not going with his brain to fight a gun in Korea, he's going to the General Eisenhower staff in Germany. All right. So my brains at this point are working for me. they're in Korea that way, and I'm going to Germany. Not so bad. Not so bad. Okay, 1951, I'm on my way to Germany. Now, but you gotta remember, I got this textile man at Turner Towers with a daughter. And he had the wedding all set, even though I never even wanted to marry her, but he in his mind.
Right.
So now he has another plan. My brother has a textile business in Zurich. So if you're in Europe and you get to Zurich, go see my brother. So I get to Germany. Now we'll get to Zurich later, because now I am in my way to Germany. She's in Turner Towers. I'm going with a girl. I showed you that letter from whatever her name was, and I'm going with this other girl, and I was seeing, I think, Honey for a while. There were, say, 4 or 5 girls that I was on my way. Well, of course, you took them all out, and you waved goodbye, and, it was all Army. Now, let me finish. I was not happy, but I was going to Germany. I, of course, hated the Germans. It was 5 years after the war, 6 years, and, And I didn't know what I was going to do in Germany. I mean, they didn't tell me I was going to have a wonderful job. So, I get on, now I'm back to a circle again. They sent me to Fort Dix, New Jersey. I wait there a week. They put me on a train. And the train takes 8 hours to get to Brooklyn. It's a 20-minute walk. From Jersey to Brooklyn, we were on that train all day, because they don't care. They wake you up at 4 in the morning. They wait 4 hours to put you on the train. For what they're paying you, they don't give a damn one bit. And now your train is parked and sitting. I could have walked from Fort Dix to Brooklyn quicker than that train. So 8 hours later, 10 hours later, we're getting off this train at the port of embarkation where I had the Irish girl meet me up. Now, so you see, I got Turner Towers, comes back into life, and the port of... Now, the best thing in the world would have been, there was a base in Brooklyn called Fort Hamilton that was near the port of embarkation, where I really wanted to be stationed. But you go home every night. But they didn't station me at Fort Hamilton. So now I'm back on a train from Fort Dix. They give you a furlough for a week or something to go home, and because you're going to go overseas. And no matter where you go, you always get a furlough, which is a leave with pay to go home. Now I'm on this boat, and I'm going to Germany. Now this is a cruise ship like you go on. You saw pictures of, these are old Army troop ships from the war. They're almost cargo ships, and instead of cargo down below, they put people. It made the slave trade look like a cruise. You saw pictures. Yeah. They give you a 2-foot high, 2-foot wide, 7-foot space, and that's where you live for 11 days. Oh my God. You don't take your clothes off. I think you sleep in your clothes. And when you get out of bed, you put your duffel bag, and you're 4 high. And you're 500 men to a stall. Anyway, by the way, we'll go into that, but that's okay. And you're seasick, and you're this, and you're that, and you smell some oil down there, and you don't realize how stupid you are. You didn't bring any food aboard. Let me finish. So, and they only give you 2 meals a day, but you got to wait 2 hours in line for your meal. They give you breakfast, and then by the time they feed everybody, it starts at 6 in the morning or 5. By the time they get to the end, clean up, they're ready for dinner.
Wow.
Because the kitchen isn't very big. So you get 2 meals a day, and they have a ship store. But the guys who run the ship stores, they're as crooked as the textile people. They're charging you $1 for a 5-cent bar of candy. And I was so sick of pineapple, because I bought cans of pineapple from them, and I ate pineapple on the trip. So here I was on the way to Germany, on this troop ship, with a continued Army life, and everyone on the ship says, we're going to write to our congressman, we're going to, man. When you get off the ship, you're pretty happy. And they give you a certificate, which I have in the book, of that you went across the ocean. It's in that book I have over there. And so now I'm landing 10, 11 days later in Bremerhaven, Germany. Bremerhaven, Germany is the northern port of Germany, because Germany has France and Switzerland and Poland. And their port is up in the North Sea up there, and it's called Bremerhaven, which was probably a submarine base for the Germans during the war. And you land there, and you still don't know, but you look at your orders, and your orders say special troops. Now, you don't know what this is. Nobody knows what it is. Well, how's some guy in Bremerhaven going to know what special troops are? And they put you on a train again. Now, you got to remember, Germany is only the size of Texas. All of Germany is the size of Texas. There were 29 million people back then living in Germany or something. But, but Germany, maybe there were 30 million, I don't know, is the size of Texas. And you take the German train, which, everything in Germany is German, and they send you to Sonthofen. Now, of course, you come in Bremerhaven, and Sonthofen's the bottom. So you come in on a boat up here, and they send you down to the Bavarian Alps. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you're in Sonthofen. Sonthofen is beautiful. Sonthofen is the Alps, the German Alps, little German villages. And you're up, and all of a sudden, when you're coming on the train into Sonthofen, it's like you're going into Switzerland with the mountains and the snow on the top. What a beautiful country. I would yell, "Hi!" No, it was Heidi country. And we get to Sonthofen, and we see this almost like a mountain retreat. Beautiful building and courtyard. Where are we? In the Nazi Youth Training School. The retreat is a big school where they would send the Nazi generals' children to learn in this, and it was never bombed. So what were we doing there? We were relaxing. We were relaxing. What do you mean relaxing? Well, you can go to the club and play pool, or you can do this. And we eat 3 meals a day in a dining room that looked like, hey, hey, ho, ho. Big dining room with windows 30 feet high on one wall. The dining room could hold 800 people, and all glass looking over the mountain. What a wonderful way to relax. Maybe they'll let me stay here for a couple of years eating food. So here I am in Sonthofen, in a nice German Nazi building that we took over for me to relax. So, it made no sense, but there I was. So what do? The first night you get into the black market. You learn that if you take your army cigarettes, which is $1 a carton, and you go down to the village, you can sell it for 20 marks, which is $20. Well, this is pretty smart.
Were you smoking at the time?
Yeah, but they allowed you to have a carton a week. You didn't smoke that much, so you were able to sell 2 cartons a month. They limited maybe 4 cartons. But let me finish. So here you are 3 days in Germany, or 2 days, and you're downtown on the black market. But they're smart in the German village, because they know everyone up in Sonthofen is new. So they're going to try to steal your cigarettes. So you meet this guy in a bar, and you got these cigarettes, you and your buddy, and cartons. Well, give me your cigarettes, I'll bring you back your money. Yeah, bring me your cigarette.
Right.
You ain't bringing back nothing. So basically you learn that you get your money, and then you get your cigarettes, and okay. When it's all over in a week, it was very nice. In fact, I have a picture on a video. They were showing a picture of Germany taken about 20 years ago, and there was this place in Sonthofen. It's still there. they put me on a train again, and they sent me to Heidelberg. Now, let me say this. They could have sent me from Bremerhaven to Heidelberg, which is half the distance, because it's in the middle of Germany, which would have been nice. I would have missed all that stuff down there. But why did they send me there to send me there? I never asked the question. But now I found out what special troops are. In Heidelberg was the headquarters of the European Command. This was the command of the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps. This was Eisenhower's headquarters. I was going to say Michael Eisner because,
Yeah,
you know,
I saw that.
they connect Eisenhower with Michael Eisner.
Right.
And this was the headquarters of Eisenhower. And he not only, it was called the EUCOM, the European Command. I have stationery in there, and it was not only, he was in charge of the American Army, Navy, and Marines, but I think he also had some oversight for the French and the English. Germany was divided into 4 areas, the 4 conquering armies: French, English, German, French, English, American, and Russian. The Russian took the eastern side with Berlin in it. We took the area around Heidelberg, and they took, the French took Baden-Baden, and the English took some spare ribs. I don't know. Okay. But you see, again, experiences. Here I was in the Army. I've experienced Fort Dix. I experienced my sergeants and my this and my Tennessee friends and my operation and all of this and trains and boats. I mean, the kids from Brooklyn hadn't gone anywhere before. And I've been in Garmisch and, not Garmisch, Sonthofen. I've been in Garmisch later. And now I'm in Heidelberg. Very pretty place. Now, I know I'm going to digress because I've been digressing all the way through. But you got to now have a picture in your head of Heidelberg. Heidelberg was never bombed. Heidelberg, there was an agreement between Germans and English. They would not bomb Oxford, we would not bomb Heidelberg. It sounds ridiculous. You killed 10 million, 50 million people. Heidelberg wasn't bombed. The university was intact. And maybe also because whoever wins wants a place to live. So all of the generals and all of the colonels lived in Heidelberg. 14 miles away in Mannheim, leveled. They put the black troops there. Strange army. We'll go into that later. Blacks and whites could not mix in the army in those days. So, here I was in Heidelberg, untouched by war, special troops. We lived at Patton Barracks, which was German Kaserne. A German Kaserne is where German troops would live when they were fighting a war. We had gun racks in the hallway. They were nice stone buildings. They were nice. And we all had rooms. I had a room with 3 people, and then I once had a room with 6. But it was nice living as far as the Army was concerned. And in one place I was rooming with a general's driver, and I was shocked. The first weekend in Heidelberg at Patton Barracks, a car pulls up with flags, General. Well, I mean, private? I didn't know we had 22 generals on the main post. We lived there, and we went to work at the post. We had 22 generals. So to see a general was quite, anyway. Now comes my sporting days. So we go to Patton Barracks. We had 5 buildings, a service club with a restaurant, and a nightclub with a bar, and I think we had a movie. And we only had 5 buildings. 1 or 2 buildings were wax, 2 buildings were men, and 1 building was military police. And they call you downstairs, which was your sergeant's office, and they're going to figure out where you're going to work. Because as of this point, there's no one been assigned. And let's say when it was all said and done, 6 of us came up from Sonthofen into Heidelberg. Some went to Frankfurt, some went to, they all were on special troops. Some people went to Mannheim. We went to Heidelberg. There were about 6 of us. And we were the cream de la crop. One guy weighed 600 pounds, and we have pictures of them there. They were people that were taken in the Army for brains. You say certainly weren't taken in for physical attributes. So we get down to the sergeant's office, and they say, who plays basketball? The guy says, you go to General so-and-so. Who's good at baseball? You go to General so-and-so. They were making up teams. The generals, each division had a baseball team, a basketball team, and a football team, and they were figuring out who to send to where to play ball. Army, Germany, Heidelberg. So wait a minute. Again, I was the last one picked because I didn't play ball. So they gave me the best job. I went to Eisenhower's office, but he had just left. And General Handy was the general in charge of EUCOM. Eisenhower went to become the head of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Eisenhower left, I moved in, they were very happy, Eisenhower was gone, and Rosenzweig was in. Okay. Now, I didn't get one of those big buildings with the generals and the engineers and this, and all the people working in those buildings didn't live at Patton Barracks. They lived elsewhere. But we only had 5 buildings, and we had lots of people working there. In fact, those buildings where the generals were built by the Germans under reparation. The Germans paid for it, put the Germans to work, and they said, okay, $20 million is off the reparations for the war, the buildings, okay. I went into a nice small building. If you see the picture there that we had at the beginning, me standing in the yard. We had a nice garden. We had a 2-story building. We had a general's mess. The general ate here. We ate next door, one kitchen. The officers ate in the officers. Now let me finish. We can eat at the Patton Barracks our breakfast, and we can go back for lunch if you want to walk or take the bus. I used to walk across the field. Or you can eat for 20 cents or 15 cents in the mess. So we ate in the mess, and at certain parties we eat with the officers or we have a thing. But 10 o'clock in the morning, we would go for coffee and donuts in the building. We were waited on by German, and we'd have coffee and donuts. And I think 3 in the afternoon, they'd give us coffee and donuts. Now let me finish. So we had 2 stories, and I think there was a basement, because I believe I worked in the basement. Okay, slight interruption, but we're continuing. Let me clear my head and see where I am. We're talking about where I worked. But before that, let me go back a few hours or days. They didn't let me go to work for quite some time. And the reason was you could not work in the general's building in my job without FBI top secret clearance. Because we had all of the plans for the invasion of Europe by Russia, what we were going to do. Everything that went through the Army, the Navy, etc. in Germany, from Washington, from the Pentagon, came through me to some degree. So I could not go to work until I got an FBI clearance for top secret. Now, there was one clearance for confidential, which was minor. Then there was top secret. Then there was cosmic, I think, which was the next level, which very few people had. And I believe the highest was for eyes only. And that meant only those people who really, really, really had to see it could see it. But I was cleared for top secret. And it would take almost a month to be cleared. I mean, how are they going to clear you? So what happens is they turn to the FBI, and now comes the FBI into Eastern Parkway, talking to your neighbors. Now, the neighbors think I've been arrested, because why is the FBI checking on this guy? So, and then after a while, they let you out of the room. There's a chauffeur's room for the generals and so on. And you sit in that room. You can't go into this or that until you're cleared. So you get this message that you're now cleared for top secret. And you now go to work. So I went to work in the message center, which is a room downstairs where the messages come in and then the general's message. Now, you got to understand, upstairs we had a 2-star general, General Handy. He had an aide, General Noce, N-O-C-E, a 1-star general. Now, in this building, there was, I think, Colonel Greenberg. Oh, Eisenhower's doctor, son, was a colonel. How he ever got there, we know. This Dr. White, see how I remember these names? It's Dr. White was Eisenhower's doctor, even into the White House. When I say I met interesting people and there's a lot of things happen in my life, it's Eisenhower. I didn't know Eisenhower, but his doctor's son, where else is he going to work? He worked with General Eisenhower. When Eisenhower left, Dr. White went with him to NATO. When he became president, Dr. White, and if you look up an encyclopedia, I'm almost sure the name was Dr. White. And he was Eisenhower's White House physician. Now, so we had Colonel White, Major Greenberg. Greenberg was the guy. Greenberg was the general's reader. Greenberg would read every newspaper, every magazine, and literally clip what he thought the general and synopsis and report it to the general. So we had Handy, we had Noce, we had White, Greenberg, and maybe about 3 others upstairs, 4 others, and that was it. It was a very small crowd, and we had about 10 of us downstairs. Okay, so it wasn't a big building. It was very nice. We also, now you got to have a social life. Now we had the wax, which was the Women Army Corps. So you go out with wax, which is in the album with the pictures, and you go out with Fräuleins. German girls are called Fräuleins. So you go out with Fräuleins. And of course, like soldiers, you go out. And I was going with a Fräulein whose husband worked on the railroad. He was a conductor on the railroad. And she worked in the service club. And then I would, but you know, we were in Germany and life, you go to the, but let me tell you about Heidelberg. I went to Heidelberg University. You see, I forget these things until this minute. Heidelberg, Sigmund Romberg wrote The Student Prince, which Grandma and I went to see the operetta. They called it an opera, but it's an operetta at the City Center this year. Sigmund Romberg wrote this beautiful music, and German, and he wrote it sitting in the Roten Ox, the Red Ox, on the main street, Strasse, whatever the main street was in Germany, across the street from your Heidelberg University. And it was about Heidelberg, how the prince comes and he's going to Heidelberg, and they sing these beautiful songs. So I would sit in the Roten Ox and be able to feel the Sigmund Romberg feeling. You see, these are the experiences. And so what happened was, back at the base, what am I going to do? I was in the message center. I wasn't crazy about it. It wasn't bad. Now, but I wasn't crazy. But I was smart. And I said, look, I know too much. They never could put me into the infantry. First, I can't shoot. And with all the information I've seen here, if I got captured, I would tell the whole story. So I said, I want to change my job. So they put me across the hall in a vault. Maybe that's where I got my claustrophobia. It was an actual vault, but it was big. It was about 30 feet long, and it was rounded ceilings, submachine guns on the wall, and there were all the plans. There were the books on the Nazi war criminals. There were the books, everyone who wanted to get their house back, every German, where we took, General Handy had to okay it. We had a ambassador, I forget his name, who loved the Germans. He was raised by an American ambassador. He was raised by a German nanny in America. And he used to try to get the general to do everything for the Germans. And the general would write him back, no, no, no. But you could see the politics. At the same time, the army was blacks here, whites here. Blacks did the trucking, quartermaster, labor. Very few were in the, they didn't want to give them guns. It was under Truman, but let me go back. The Secretary of Defense was a lady, Rosenberg, and she came over. And they said, well, she's Jewish, you're Jewish, you go to the meeting. Really? So whatever papers they needed in the auditorium or the conference room, I had to stay. But when you had these papers, you could not leave them without a signature. So if I brought the general a paper, and it was marked top secret, unless he signed for it, I had to stay there. You just couldn't give him the paper. Every top secret document had to be signed for. So I would sit at the meeting with Mrs. Rosenberg, I think her name was. And so you see, here I am in the Army. I'm not in Korea. I'm working with the top general, General Handy. I don't mean working with him. He didn't come to me and ask me how to attack Russia. But I'm working in an environment different than the average soldier. I always thought it's because I looked like Robert Redford. That was the... Okay. So here I am, and now I'm transferred to the vault. Now this is interesting because I'm reading all this good stuff. If Russia comes through here, we go here. And I mean, the more I learn, the more I can fight this war with Russia. I get tired of that. And I was tired of this, I was tired of that. Now, you got to remember, we had a train back at Patton Barracks. Saturday morning was 3 hours or 4 hours of training, and Wednesday evening we had a train. We're soldiers. This nice life was wonderful, but we had a train. So one morning, they said, you're going to go on a march. Now, you got to remember, I was in the Army, and I never slept out of doors. Because in basic training, when they slept out of doors, the group before me, it was so cold, got frostbite, they cut it out in Massachusetts. No one could sleep outdoors. Then I went to Europe, and we had no real outdoor life. And so they said, you got to march. Well, one group marched, and they told the general, we're too tired. So no more marching. There was no more marching. But we had classes on Saturday morning, which I think I slept through. I used to sleep through a lot of classes. We used to sit on the floor. No chairs, on the floor. And so over there, we lived, we ate, and we had a nightclub and a party. We'd go downtown. Oh, in Heidelberg, we took over the service club. The American soldiers was the city hall, but it became our service club. And we took over the theater and the golf course and the swimming pool, all for our own use. So, when Bob Hope came to town, but he never showed up, Les Brown and Bob Hope, we got down to the theater and they said, Bob Hope's not coming. We said, But, so we had the restaurants. We had our own, they didn't want us to eat in the German restaurants. We could, I did, but we had our own restaurant where for 25 cents you can eat, or a better restaurant. So we had all over Heidelberg, restaurants, places, but we did go to Road Knox and we went to the beer halls and we had a steak here. We had a river running through the town, the Neckar, which is in the song Student Prince. It's one of the Neckar River. Very beautiful. The banks roll down. And so basically, here we are in Heidelberg. I'm in the Army. I haven't gone yet to Baden-Baden. I haven't gone to Paris, which we'll get to. But we're going to wind up this tape, and we're going to get to, was that another hour? Good. I'll be 92 when this is over. Can you do one more? This is tape number 4, and I guess today is the 19th, Friday, March 2004. We're going to go back to the chair in a minute, but we're going to show you the room, basically part of it, and we're going to come in from that side, where we're doing the recording each day. And then we're going to show you some of the pictures of Heidelberg and part of my life in the Army, and I will describe some of the pictures so you'll have an idea what is happening. Okay. Yeah. You all running, good? Oh, see? This is where I lived, Patton Barracks. This is where I lived in Patton Barracks. That's the patch I had on my shoulder. Now, Eisenhower had the same patch, but his was black background, mine was blue. It was the same division of some kind. Now, I'm going to turn the page. I don't know if my arm's in it, but let's not worry about my arm. This is where I worked. It was, we crossed the field from Patton Barracks, and this was the building where the general was. The other buildings where all the other generals were, pardon me, were down the road a piece on the base, but this was the little building we worked in, which was very pretty, and I don't know if you can see it, nice gardens and so on. And she's going to zoom. Okay.
I already zoomed in on.
You already zoomed. Okay.
You missed it.
Now, just briefly, because we're going to discuss these things. Well, this is not important. These were some of the whacks that shared the base with us, and we would have a little country club, a servicemen's club, where we'd go out at night. It was called the Harmony Club. I don't know if you can read that card.
Yep.
Now, you got to remember, this was 1951, which is 53 years ago. But I have a whole lot of albums of all my trips. I won't go into everything. These are some of the guys that I roomed with, and some of what we would call in those days German Fräuleins. And this we won't shoot too much of. This is we had our own swimming pool. We had a rough life in the Army. Downtown we had a swimming pool. And that was Grandpa right over there. I don't know if you can see Grandpa. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's keep going. And Grandpa tried golf. And the golf didn't work too well. I played golf once, and that was where I did my artwork, which we'll discuss later in my art uniform up here. Mm-hmm. And this was one of my roommates. And then I'll tell you about how I went to typing school and why. And I went to typing school at Heidelberg University, but it was in the troop information section, and that was my teacher, the young lady whose father was an officer. She was an American girl. I don't remember her name, I just wrote down teacher. And this, of course, is what we call the Schloss. That's the castle on top of Heidelberg Mountain, right above. And that was an old Schloss, an old castle. I'll end it soon because we're going here. This is Grandpa in Mannheim, Germany, which was destroyed, as you can see. This is 6 years later, 1951, still destroyed. And then I go on to Baden-Baden, which is in the French zone, which isn't that important, but we'll get to Switzerland in a minute. And this is, remember I mentioned this is Rosenberg, and I took the papers to her meeting. I don't know if I covered it or not. And this is General Eisenhower playing golf, and that's my General Handy and my Mr. Greenberg, who was what we call the reader. I don't know what we covered or what we will cover. Now, I won a trip, which we'll cover, to Garmisch. And we went sailing in the Alps, and that little thing says Special Troop Man wins trip to Garmisch in the middle there, right down here.
Got that already.
And that's me, Grandpa, 50-some-odd years ago, wearing a Tyrolean hat on the docks in the Bavarian Alps, in the border community. And of course, we'll go to, I go to Zurich, Switzerland. Now, I'll tie this in with Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, because when I went to Zurich, I met with the people who were the brother and the niece of the man on Eastern Parkway who wanted me to play chess with him. And they invited me to lunch at their house, and it was Friday, and they were going down to the south of France to spend the weekend, and they invited me, and I said, no, I don't want to go to the south of France. I didn't like the French people. No, I didn't like them then, I don't like them now. So anyway, we'll end it here because it's just a lot more pictures in Luzerne, etc., etc. And these are guys that, like, in the Army, you have roommates and you have buddies or whatever they call them. And this guy here, that's funny. He would wash his hands 22 times a day. All day he would wash his hands.
That's called OCD.
And so we said to the captain or the sergeant, let's get him discharged. He doesn't belong here. He's washing his hands 22 times a day. And the sergeant said to us, we can't discharge him because we just made him a corporal. And if he was washing his hands 22 times a day, why'd we make him a corporal? So they kept him in, and I guess he just still washes his hands. So these are the things. We'll go back to the chair and we'll discuss my trip home from Germany. This was a trip because we'll go in.
Yeah.
Well, here we are back in our chair, back in the living room. We've gone through the scrapbook for a while, and I think we left off yesterday. I was 1951. I was in the Army. I don't know if we discussed, it wasn't important. We discussed what I did in the Army, and we discussed that I worked in a vault, top secret, but I didn't get to my next job in the Army. For some reason, the vault was very nice. I had a submachine gun on the wall, and it was actually a curved, rounded ceiling like a vault, and it had a safe, I think, like a door. And it was, and by the way, if you took any papers out of the building, you had to walk with what they call a 45, which was a big gun on your side, because you had to protect the papers. Now, I think I only went once out of the building with the papers, which I had in that picture of me with a 45 on my waist. Oh, I don't know if I would have used it. I probably would have if someone attacked me to take away my plans. There was a plans where I was going to go drink that night or something. I don't know what I was carrying. But anyway, so I worked in the vault, and for some reason, I don't know what it was, either I didn't like the vault, or I don't think it was a matter they didn't like me because, you know, the vault was like Walt Disney. It was no, that's just old jokes from the old Army days. Anyway, it was for some reason they moved me across the street to a cryptic message center where the messages would come in and they would be decoded or coded, and we would have to type them because there were no copy machines, there were no fax machines. It was a ditto machine. So it would come in maybe on tape or something, and then we would have to type the message and then make copies, and the only problem was I didn't type. And that was a big problem. Now, I guess the reason I didn't go there originally was, one, I didn't type, and two, I didn't play basketball. And this was where I think the basketball players went. So there I was in this new center, and it was a night job. I think I worked a lot at nights. It was open 24 hours a day. So they had to send me to typing school. And that was the picture I showed you of the teacher and the guys at the typing school. And I had to do 35 words a minute to get out of the school. Well, I got out of the school, but I never got to the numbers. See, 35 words a minute were words, not numbers. So my hands never got up to numbers. And to this day, I type with one or two fingers, and I don't do the numbers. And I'm going to get back to education now, because yesterday I said that I had left high school in the senior year. Behind me is a book I read last night, a magazine. And in the year I was supposed to graduate, only 37% of the Americans of Caucasian background graduated high school. And only about 12% of African Americans graduated high school, and they didn't have any records of Hispanics. Now today, 87% of Americans graduate high school, 77%. So back in the days of 1945, only 30-some-odd% of Americans graduated high school. So it's a different era. There wasn't the technology. It wasn't the, I mean, we can become a salesman in the garment center with a high school diploma or not. So I just wanted to point out, getting back to that day, that it wasn't a horror. In New York City, there was a larger percentage of graduates. In Tennessee, there were less. But I decided I'll move to Tennessee where the numbers were 12%. No. So I was reading that last night in Newsweek magazine. And there's another important fact. I want to digress and bring up a fact, because after we got the recording yesterday, Tricia was asking me questions. And I had answers and I didn't have answers. Like, you know, how did you do this in the Army? Tell them you didn't want to work here, you didn't want to do this, etc. And I don't know how that worked, but it just seemed to have a work. I wasn't dealing, as I said, I couldn't have done this in basic training as much because I was dealing with mental incompetence. But when you're dealing with officers and general staff, and in that element, you can do things or possibly say things that it was the Army all right, but it wasn't the blood and guts Army. It was an army of paper people and generals and majors and colonels and me, a corporal. So I guess you did things or can get away with things. I don't know if I discussed when I would go to paint, downtown, you couldn't get off the base without a uniform on Saturday or at night. You only had to wear a uniform. And I discussed this with your mother. And you can get off the base if you were playing baseball, football, or something. You needed a uniform, or golf. Well, I wasn't playing football, baseball, or golf, so how did I get off the base without clothes or military? So I figured out, I would tell them I was an artist. And I bought an easel, a wooden box of paint, and I put my dungarees on, as you can see in the picture, and I'd go to the gate, and I'd say, "Where you going?" Or they'd say, "Where you going?" I said, "I'm going to paint." "What do you mean you're going to paint? Where's your uniform?" I said, "You can't paint in a uniform. It'll get dirty." So they figured out that I had to get off the base and paint. I guess I got down to Heidelberg, and I put it in the locker at the railroad station, and then I was, for the weekend, without my uniform. Now, it wasn't dishonest, I guess, because I was a painter at heart, and I did end up painting. We're going to look at my paintings somewhere as we go along in the videos. But you were doing things, I guess, and then of course, as I went through the book, we're going to digress, we're going to go back. So Tricia was asking me why, how, what, and so on. And I said to myself last night, you are either a participant in life or an observer of life. And I, what she calls grandpa, am an observer of life and not a participant in life. Now, there are two kinds of people, believe it or not. There are the observers and the participants. Now, it's maybe some people observe or think they observe and participate. But when it comes down to the reality, the participant goes to the movie and watches the movie. The observer goes to the movie and counts the chandelier bulbs. The participant goes to a baseball game and watches the baseball game. An observer watches the audience. So I realized the reason I had all these facts and these memories and this recall of 76 years is that I probably went through life as an observer rather than a participant. So while as a participant, you may enjoy it a little more, but as an observer, you absorb more. And as an observer, you can become a critic where a participant can't become a critic. You can't, if you're in the government, you're in the government, you're a participant. If you're not in the government, but you observe it, you can become a critic. I don't mean a critic negative or positive, but the analysis. So in answering, and I don't say I'm right, because it's a concept that I probably imagined myself, that if you go through life as a participant, nothing wrong with it. You are participating in life. When I went to Disney, I didn't go to Disney to go on rides. You see, I went to Disney to observe. Never went on rides or anything. When I go somewhere, I'm not participating. If you'll notice, I always have that blank look on my face. I'm observing. Even when we go to the theater to see these plays, I'm checking the audience, I'm checking the shoes on the comic or the backdrops, but I'm not fully involved in participating. I didn't go there to be entertained. And so that's the answer to your question, how and why. And I remember in the early part of this recording, way back 2 days ago, I said the only merit badge I got was the observation merit badge. And I realized that probably, maybe it started then, at 13 as a Boy Scout. Well, that was my role in life at that point, when I could observe things. So that may be the answer, Tricia, to what my life is. And I'm an observer, not a participant as much. It's a very interesting thing. You asked these questions yesterday. Now, where were we located? We were located, I was 23 years old, I was in the Army, and I was living a nice life, playing golf once and not doing well, and going down to the Neckar River and go to the Roden Ox and Heidelberg University to type. And Bob Hope came one day and we went to the theater to see Bob Hope. He played for all the servicemen. I told you he didn't show up. Les Brown, the Band of Renown, showed up and we all went, ah, but no Bob Hope. I did see Bob Hope later, which is another story, for the MGM Studio 25th anniversary of Disney. Bob Hope was there and so forth. But that's another story. So here I am in the Army and I'm doing fine and I get a message. Well, so I go to Zurich, I go to Luzerne, and I meet with these people and I meet with these, and it's, you know, you're living a life. You want to be home, but it's not bad. I go to Zurich or Luzerne, and I see at the railroad station that there's a Rolls Royce with the name of a hotel on the side, the Baur. Well, so I check into some little hotel for 30 cents a night, who knows what, and I'm really impressed because I go to a restaurant and I write home every day. I wrote my mother and father every day, and I didn't mail it every day. I may have mailed it once a week. It was a chronicle. I have them in there. This is today, a date, and so they knew it. And I said, I never saw so much silverware. The Europeans, to me, this kid from Brooklyn, French fries were in a hot plate, and they were, but anyway, so I said, okay, look at that. Across the street is the Rolls Royce in front of this hotel called the Baur. So in my uniform, I go that night to the Baur bar and nightclub and restaurant. And boy, was I out of place. Gigolos at the bar and fancy ladies, and I mean, it was really, and I found out later, that was the hotel. It was like the Waldorf Astoria. But that's what I did. I went and I observed the Baur. And years later, there was a manager at the California Grill that was sent over for 6 months or a year from Switzerland. And I mentioned the Baur. He was a food manager. And he said, oh, the Baur, and so I remember why would I remember the name of the hotel even from 50 years ago? Anyway, so here I am, I'm in Switzerland, and I go to Luzerne, I go to the top of the mountain, I do everything. I go into an ice cave, which I wouldn't do today. You're in Switzerland, and you go through this tunnel of ice, I don't know, and you end up in Austria on the other side. And in Austria, I went and looked at the Zugspitze. I went up the mountain on a big cable car, and I'm talking tops of mountains, not like Blizzard Beach. We're talking mountains. And so anyway, I had a nice time between going to Zurich and so on. And back in home, in my base, I get a message that my father died. I didn't know he was sick. And I want to go home. And they actually say to me, you can't go home. And I say, why can't I go home? And they say, because you're Jewish. Now, and I say, well, what has that got to do with it? They say, well, because Jewish people bury the dead in 24 hours. Your father's already buried today. So why are you going home? So I said, well, I think it'd be nice to see my mother. And they said, no. So let me finish. And I remember saying to them, the next thing I did was, I went to the rabbi, or the chaplain, who was a Jewish rabbi, and I said, I want to go home. He said, well, we really have a policy, you can't go home. So I said, look, let's do this the right way. I really mean it. I said, I'm going to sit here. See, I have another year to go. I'm going to sit here for a year and not work. So you have your choice. I really said this to them. You have your choice. You send me home on furlough, or I sit here and I don't work anymore. So I don't know what moved them, but I went home. Wait a minute, let me finish. And I think about it today. Now, already maybe 2 days had transpired, or a day, so I didn't get home that day. And the next thing I knew, they had written orders. You didn't go anywhere in the Army unless they write orders. And they write orders for me to fly home. And in order to catch a military plane, you got to go to Frankfurt, Germany. So I guess take the train or something to Frankfurt. And I get off, and you go to a place, and you present your order. It's the airport. And they say, fine, you got to stay at a hotel. I said, I went to the hotel, and I showed them my orders, and I don't know if I slept or not, but they said, oh my God, and the orders were from the General Staff, Heidelberg, Special Troops, and they put me on a plane immediately, I think, at the German airport in Frankfurt. And it wasn't a passenger plane, it wasn't seats, it was like where paratroopers would jump out. There were benches along the side, and I forget the name of the airport. And anyway, I lay down on the floor, and I go to sleep, and the plane taxis up the field, and I wake up, and it stopped. I said, oh boy, I'm home. I said, wait a minute. They opened the door. I haven't left the airport. There was something wrong with the plane, so when they taxied and I fell asleep, it didn't go anywhere. They had a problem with the door. Then I went to the hotel, I think, and slept the night till they fixed the door. So my sleeping didn't get me anywhere. Now I get on this plane, and I got a map in there in my book. I get on the plane to fly to Springfield, Massachusetts, to take a train down to New York. And the next thing I know, I'm in the Azores, an island off Spain, because there's trouble with the plane, with the doors. And I land, this is a true story, it's in there. I land in the Azores, which is, in fact, President Bush met in the Azores about 6 months ago before the Iraqi war with the people, the British and so on. They met in the Azores. I get off the plane and I see a guy on the airport field, Marvin, oh gee, I don't know his name, Big Fat Marvin. Lived in a house next to me in Brooklyn. Marvin, I knew his brother, he was my brother's friend. And I remembered that he, as a younger person, used to go out to Floyd Bennett Field and wanted to work on airplanes. He was in the Air Force working on airplanes in the Azores, peacetime. Not awful, I can't think of his last name. Anyway, not important. Well, Marvin also, as a part-time job, showed movies at night in the open on a big screen for the troops. So that night I watched movies on the screen in the Azores, and the next morning I flew out to Springfield, Massachusetts, which was fine. It was already 3 days, had a breakdown here, I was in Azores, my father was gone, and my mother was sitting Shiva, and I was in the Azores watching a movie, which I don't even remember what I watched. Now, we get back on a plane, and the next thing I know, I'm landing in a blizzard in Newfoundland. Now, that makes sense. Well, of course, when you're coming from the Azores, what am I doing up in Newfoundland? Well, I guess they go up north, go across, because it's closer in the North Sea, and they couldn't come down to Springfield. Either they had a problem with the plane or the storm was too great. So I spend the night, they give me a room in the Air Force building, barracks, and then I go to the nightclub, the show, and I'm talking blizzard. I'm talking blizzard like I never saw in Liberty, New York. And I had to walk back to the barracks. I didn't think I'd make it to Newfoundland in the winter. Newfoundland. Anyway, true story. I know I'm boring everyone, but who cares? And I finally get on a plane to Massachusetts. Massachusetts, I take a train, I guess to Penn Station or Grand Central Station. And when I get out of the train, my brother's waiting for me at the station. And I said, Robert, how did you know I'm on this train? Azores, airport, Frankfurt, Newfoundland, Springfield. He says, we've been tracking you all the way. The Army was telling him where I was. So we went home and I had a 2-week leave. Now there's a meaning to all of this now. Now because my father was gone and I was the only one at home, I was able to go to the draft board and say, I want to stay home. There's no one to take care or support my mother. My mother didn't work and I would be the only support. So they said, fine, stay home. And they said, we're going to discharge you from the Army. They needed me over there like a hole in the head. You know, they didn't need me. So I said, fine. Now, meanwhile, when I was home, after my furlough, I had to report to Fort Dix, New Jersey. I get to Fort Dix and they say, you're shipping out for Germany tomorrow. I said, no, you got it all wrong. I'm getting out of the Army tomorrow. They said, look, we don't have any orders. And unless we get orders, you're going out tomorrow. So they do the same thing. They put me on a train and they go down to the boat. And the boat's horrible. It's the same boat. And I'm going back on that boat. Now I took the boat over and I flew back, but now I'm going back on the boat. Another 10 days of hell. But they won't change their mind. So I'm on the boat and I go home to Bremerhaven, down to And I get there, and the orders are there to go home. But the Army don't care. They put me on a boat, they'll put me on another boat. So I say, wait a minute, let's do this right. I've been here in Germany, and I haven't been to Paris. So I'll go home in a few days, but not now. I want to go to Paris. So give me a trip to Paris. So they gave me orders. It's in here. The paperwork to Paris and the Paris trip. I went to Paris and got home from Paris. Took the train up to Sonthoven. Got on that stupid cruise ship called the Wonder and the Magic. You wondered why you were alive, and it's magic that you didn't die on the boat. So you spent 10 days over, 10 days going back, 10 days, 33 days in all on this Harrier. So I get back, and now I'm a civilian. Well, the Army's very nice, because when you're a civilian, there's a thing called the 5221 Club. The 5221 Club. It's a beautiful club. They give you $21 a week for 52 weeks if you don't go to work. Because I had a regular discharge, a military honorable discharge, and they did this after the war because everyone could get a job that day or they didn't want to go to work. So I was in the 5221 Club, and I received $21 a week, which was not enough to live, but it was nice. And I went to the beach, and I went to Brighton Beach, Manhattan Beach, and Coney Island, I guess for several months. And then I decided, well, while I was in the Army, I got a GED, a General Education Diploma, so I was able to go to higher education. And I decided that I wanted to be a producer in television, a television director or producer. And I'm going to go backwards now. I went to art school for a while at the Brooklyn Museum. I used to paint. When I was in Germany, I used to do some magnificent black and white charcoals that were awesome. Some were ones in your house. I did some that disappeared that were the best, and they were great. And I did the one over here, which will show. As a matter of fact, why don't we just lift the camera. I want to start talking. Okay, we've been talking 3 days sitting in a chair. The room's a little messy, but we're going to take a picture of the setting of where we're doing all this recording. This is, I don't know if you can call it the grand room, the living room, or what, of our home. And this is one of the pictures I did as a young child. Now, I don't know if you can zoom in real close or get it real close. This is Winston Churchill in oils. You got it completely framed. And the room is, we're going to show pictures and the room. Of course, if you come this way with me, and this is Stephen over here. This was done, by the way, if we can get to that corner, that is an English painter, La Grosse, I think, going back into the 1800s. This is Stephen from 1706. No, it was the wrong year. And watch the wires here. It's just an eclectic collection of things that I loved. This is one little corner where we have an old Philippine boat, or made in the Philippines. And the reason that's there, that sign is, Ian McGregor was a man I met at Disney who was making Disney things, and I felt a little sorry for him, so I bought that, and he gave me his picture and says, don't ever throw it away. So he sits in my living room. And of course we got pictures in here of Tricia, and I don't know if you can get it, your family at the wedding when you were a little child. And you see? Now, of course, I'm going to shoot across the room. You got to forget there's a messy thing here because we're showing pictures on the couch and so on. But if you look across the room, you'll see some wonderful paintings by a man who died, and believe it or not, the colors of the bowl here were designed to match the colors of the paintings. And we put these little teddy bears around. This is, the room is made up into little vignettes. This is the piano and this wall section. If you see a lot of pictures of Tricia and Stephen on the piano, right behind you here now, that's an old English picture up there that's been in the family for years, 2 years. No. I bought that way back in Liberty at a gallery in, I think, New York. You'll also notice there are Disney things here, which is strange, but we'll go into the whole Disney story later on. This is Grandma, Grandpa, and their friends at Disney, Mickey and all the gang. And this is another little vignette area of some old paintings on the wall. But again, we have the boat and some old pieces and our friend Norman Rockwell, which is another story completely, because we used to have a Norman Rockwell room with signed Norman Rockwells, which are now sitting in the warehouse. Okay, now of course, we'll get back to me in a minute. This is not a tour, but now we have this, which is a very interesting piece, and I'll discuss it because later on there's a meaning to it. This is a castle that was made by the Heinz Company, not the food company, in England. And he had a deal with Disney that they would only make 100 pieces. So look at it from this side over here, probably get a better picture. And there was some big dispute. For years, they only ended up selling 6 of them. And I guess there were 5,000 a piece without the case. And Mr. Heinz was very aggravated, I guess, because none were selling. And they weren't pre-assembled, but he had all the parts in England. They had a big fight. They destroyed the molds. Disney somehow broke their sample, and only, I think, 6 or 7, I called England, and I spoke to the Disney buyer about 5, 6 years ago, and it's a dead issue, but there's only, I think, 6 or 7 of these in the whole world, and they're quite a mighty piece. Anyway, we'll go on, and there's nothing more. We'll go into a little vignette over here. This is very interesting, which we'll get to all these things as we go on in life. These are the statues. We had made a party at Disney for Tricia and the family, and they decorated the buffet tables with these dolls. And I won't go into this party at this point, and this is what they called, later on we'll go into it, was the David. It's carrying on the Walt Disney tradition. The 1995 David J. Ross Quality Service Award presented to Kevin Myers. Now, there was only probably 8 of these presented, and then Disney got the idea of doing it as well with the Award of Excellence, and they made it smaller and so I stopped, and I do have many of them in the warehouse still, and this, of course, is a special piece that's too heavy to lift. And Allison and Tricia and Stephen, Michael have one. It was a special gift. The artist signed it from Disney to me and to them. And so the point is, this is we will shoot into here very briefly, but there's a mirror and another vignette. Why we're bringing this up, if you'll see, there's a lot of artwork. And we won't go through the whole house. But there's artwork. And this is Mitchell at that end, and Allison, and Eileen. And this is the dining room, which right now we've got a problem. We had a water situation, so we won't go into there. But again, if you go to the walls, you'll see, again, some beautiful paintings and some nice things and so forth. Now we'll come back down to here, and we will see Tricia over here, and on this wall. And so basically, this is the, I guess it's our living room. Our family room is in there. And we're not going to go through the house, but I wanted to give you an idea where we're videoing this from. Okay, we're going to phase out. And if you see teddy bears around, Grandma likes to put teddy bears, and I like teddy bears.
Stop
So
it. I just... Oh.
All right, we're back in our chair, and we took a tour of the room. The only thing in this room that I painted was, of course, the Winston Churchill. But what I wanted to show you was, because we were talking about going to art school, and Trish is making signs on the thing. She's taking 24 from 60, I guess. Okay, I know my granddaughter. Anyway, I just want to let you know that even though she's not in the picture, Mrs. Ross, Grandma Ross, is in the picture. Not my grandmother, but Trisha's grandmother. But she's not in the picture because her contract in Hollywood doesn't permit her to make movies outside of Hollywood. She has one of those strict contracts which says, what does it really say? I don't know. But anyway, that's only kidding. She just didn't want to be in this particular video because her dressing gown was not apropos for the colors of the day. Anyway, so I went to art school, Brooklyn Museum. I always, in elementary school, I painted football players. I always constructed things. I made model airplanes, model trains, and I was always doing things. That was my pleasure. So I went to art school at the Brooklyn Museum, which was down at Grand Army Plaza next to Prospect Park, across the street from Turner Towers. And I signed up for artwork. Now, I guess that was before I went in the Army, because I think I went into the class, and I was about 4 minutes late, and I walked in, and there was this lady standing there undressed, because I didn't know it was an art class that they start out first lesson, first minute, with someone standing there undressed. Well, I didn't mind it, but I just realized I wasn't the greatest person at painting, what do they call them, figures. I was more into the apples and the pears and the glassware and the vases and the vases. So I think I only went to that first class, and I sort of never went back. So my art lessons just went to the one class at the Brooklyn Museum. I think they charged $10 for this. It was a city museum. And that's something else I want to talk about, going way back. As a child, 3, 4, 5 years old, we lived across the street from Public School 167. In the summer, they didn't have summer classes, but they had summer projects. For example, once a week in the auditorium, they would have a little show maybe, or a movie. And once I remember the Wonder Bread Baking Company sent down the Wonder Bread Man, and they sang songs, "This is the something of Wonder Bread," or who knows what. We had no video, we had no Sesame Street, we had nothing. So that was our entertainment. And then we had classes where we made baskets. You took not leather, but hay, or what?
I don't know the word for
What is it? It's little stalks, and you wrapped them around. You made Indian baskets. So in the summertime, we did things besides going to the pool, and here we filled our time constructively. And we didn't know we were being constructive at the time, but I think it paid off in life because you were doing things. You weren't into drugs. Oh, by the way, about drugs, there's another story about drugs. I grew up in a drug element. Of the 22 guys on the corner, and we had 2 crowds, that crowd mostly all used drugs. This crowd that I was in did not. Let me finish. Most of them used marijuana, and a few of them used, I guess, heroin. That was before the Army, and the reason I know it's before the Army, when I was in the Army, I got a newspaper clipping from one of the guys that Mel was in jail. Mel Resnick. He was arrested. He was called the Piano Bandit. He would rob a house by night point, and if they had a piano, he would play piano. So they called him the Piano Bandit. I didn't know. I was in the Army. So Mel spent 10 years in prison. And so basically, the other guys weren't as nice. They really weren't. They were very rough. They would ride the back of trolleys, and we were the simple ones. But, let me finish. Mother and I, grandmother, went to a bar mitzvah 27 years ago when these guys were all successful businessmen, and it was the guy had a house, well, let me just say this, he had 12 staff rooms. He bought this house and then he moved, but Stanley Carp, he always bought big houses. His daughter's in jail in Orlando now, but let me finish. And the guys were sitting there smoking marijuana, and their wives were using diamond and pearl roach sticks. And Mother and I got up and sort of left. So basically, it's not foreign to me. When I lived in Rockaway, in the basement, we had in the summer, we'd take rooms in a hotel, like in the basement, and they would have marijuana parties. I'd just get up and leave. And so there was a period where the drugs are not new. If in 1947 and 48 and 49, they were using drugs. And so it's not something that came up today. That's all I want to bring up about. It's not a new phenomenon. So I went back into the drug era. And by the way, as I speak, I'll keep going back and forth because it brings up things. So now I'm out of the Army. And I get back to Brooklyn, and I decide to go to the RCA Institute in Manhattan to study electronics. Now, let me explain. I know I don't have the background to become a director or producer in television. So I have the bright idea of getting into television by the back door, becoming a technical person, either working on they had just invented where the words move on for the reading, the screen, or as a person in the control room, and then I'd work myself in. So I start going to the RCA Institute to get a license to operate radio stations, which led me to a career. The school was only 2 years, and you studied the formulas and the this and the that, and it was basically, the first part was just a almost repair education for those who wanted to stop after 6 months. But then for those who wanted to get the license to operate the station, because you had to take a federal government test, you went into the further. The point after that was ship's operator. The next level was the guy on the boat who did the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and how to maintain communications from the boat to shore. That was another branch off of RCA, because they were in the electronic business. Now, RCA owned NBC, and Rockefeller Center was there. So we, by the means of, when RCA television needed ushers, pages in the studios, the guys would do, they would come to our school, and some of the guys were hired, which gave us access to all the studios because they were your friends, and you said, I want to see this and I want to see that. So I spent a lot of time before I met Grandma and when I met Grandma at NBC, and if it was a studio show like Steve Allen, and Edie Gourmet and Steve Lawrence, I'd sit in the audience. But if it was a stage of studio only, where they were doing dramatics and so on, I'd go in, put a chair on the side, and sit. And so I had a lot of exposure to a television world. And I decided when I got out of RCA, now I'm going to go back, I got married when I was just getting out of RCA. And I'll tell you about Grandma and meeting Grandma, and I was driving a taxi going to RCA and the jobs in New York and radio, and we're going to go through all of that. But there was this period when I got out of the Army, in I guess 52, and where I was on the club of $21 a week and the RCA Institute. And now comes a real transition in life, because up until now, it was basically me. Me and my mother, me and my sister, me and my brother. But now I was going into earning a living, which, you know, you went to school and you were trained and getting a license to run a radio station as the engineer. And by the way, you could not run or operate a radio station in the United States unless you had a diploma of a licensed engineer, a federal license, hanging in the control room. So the radio stations had to have an engineer, because they had to make sure that the transmitters weren't going and broadcasting into other frequencies. And that license, I guess it may still be the law, I don't know. But I had the license to hang. I had a license to hang. So it was important to have this license. And I'm going to now get into a portion of life, but I want to put a little closure on the past and make sure I've covered everything. And by the way, what is this all about? Tricia and the family and I decided that for some reason we're going to do this, as I said the other day, the autobiography or the biography. Same, a biography is someone else does it, autobiography you do it yourself. But it's a biography of my life and how it intertwined with the times, the wars, and the different things that were going on in the world. And I hope I covered my relatives, my father, to some extent, my father's two brothers, Saul and Louis, his two sisters, Yetta and who knows who, and my mother's three sisters and two brothers. But I have never gone into, my sister married Sidney. And so now the Sidney Flayton was in the family. And Brother Robert married Bertha. So now there was Bertha Ross in the family. And Marvin, my brother who died when he was 55, he married Helen Rosenzweig. He didn't change his name. That was Jeff's father. Jeff's father died when... So my brothers married, my sister married, my aunts married. So they brought in the Spurbers, the Resnickoffs, the Werfels, the three sisters. Jack brought in a Helen, and Uncle Joseph brought in an Essie, Aunt Essie. Aunt Essie was fine, but every time he went to kiss her, she said, I have a cold. Lady had a cold for 49 years. Anyway, but that's beside the point. They had a pretty rough life. But the point I'm saying is the family, of course, expanded because there were a lot, and then my mother had 9 grandchildren because Robert had 2, and Helen lost a child, my sister Lois Beth at 2 years old, and then she had her children, and then she had Marvin and Helen had Jeffrey and their kids, those sisters. So there were grandchildren. I had the 3 children, your mother and so forth. So we had, you see, the family that was basically a family is now a lot more people, a lot more intricate. My mother would sometimes fight with her sisters. They didn't talk for a while. I separated from the family because I'm not a family-oriented, like Uncle Jack. He invited us to a party in his house in Jersey, but no one could go in the house. We had to stay in the yard, and we had to change the diaper for Mitchell. He wouldn't let you in the house. You had to change him in the garage. I went, well, he's crazy. He didn't want anyone dirtying his carpet, I guess. I don't know. And things happened. Someone died, and Uncle Jack ran and got the coins out of the closet. I mean, what I'm trying to say is even relatives could be cheap. And I guess Uncle Jack was cheap. He's dead now. He died recently. But the point, and his sons are around. One's a dentist and one's a who knows what. But you see, I didn't mind leaving all those people. I haven't seen Jack in 50 years, 45 years. Elsie, I saw her up in Grossinger's once. I haven't spoken to her since I got married. She was fighting with my mother at the time, arguing, and I invited her to my wedding. She said, "Why should I come to your wedding? Who are you to me?" My aunt, very close aunt. So I never spoke to her again. And then I bumped into her at Grossinger's. I did say hello, but that was years later. But you see, I never minded severing relationships. And the reason was, I wasn't a participant, I was an observer. No, it just wasn't my thing. I was the only one in the family who moved out of town. Oh, my brother went to Washington, I told you, took a job with the government, but he came back. But I was the only one in the family that left. I went to Port Jervis. When I finished my school, I'll tell you, I went to Port Jervis, I went to Liberty, we spent our life in Liberty, and then we moved to Florida. They're all still in New York, those that are alive. Helen's there, and Marvin's family's there, and Robert's family's there, and they still see the Werfels, and they still see the Resnikovs, and because no one left. And I was the only one who left. I was the Christopher Columbus of the Rosenzweig family. Tricia keeps shaking her head. She says, "Hey, who's going to watch this thing?" So it even went back to the early days when I left and parted. I still talk to my brother. I spoke to him the other day. They have weddings, they have bar mitzvahs, they have this, they have funerals, and I send my condolences and my gift, but I don't go. I don't travel. I don't fly. I can't. So I don't go out of. And they're going to hear these messages, and they're going to wonder what happened to my brother, my sister, my nephew, my cousin, my this. But not that I'm a weirdo, but I just don't have that necessity to be involved as a participant. They have a wedding, everyone's, I gotta go, I gotta dance, I gotta do the hora, I gotta eat. And I say, why? You know, and it's the truth. In some people's lives, in most people's lives, Trisha's like me, I know that. I mean, Trisha is a grandfather. I mean, she'll pay you not to go to your party, okay? I know Trisha. But that's about it, because she's probably not a participant, she's an observer. And the thing is this, it's not the happiest life, but you'll learn a lot, and it really ends up being pretty rewarding, I'm dry, because, I don't know, it gives you a nice perspective. And as we go through my life, you'll see it's been a wonderful life of being a critic and being an observer, and it led to a tremendously wonderful life. And then I'll think